Hello everyone, my name's Nigel Phair, and today we're going to be talking about Security Operations Centre. Now, CREST provides professional level certifications for individuals surrounding penetration testing, incident response and threat intelligence, but they also provide accreditations for organisations such as Security Operations Centre, and that is the topic of our discussion. Now, a Security Operations Centre, or a SOC, is that centralised function that utilises people, processes and technologies that might monitor and improve an organisation's cybersecurity posture. It's a great way of detecting, preventing and responding to cybersecurity incidents. Now today I'm talking to Brian Smith from Slipstream Cyber, and he's gone through that process of a Security Operations Centre accreditation. G'day Brian.
G'day Nigel.
So Brian, before we start off, I'd love to hear a little bit about you, where you've come from, your background as a CISO and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I've been the founder and CEO of Slipstream for just coming up to 4 years now, and prior to that was the head of security for a Australian Stock Exchange listed sort of top 10 multinational company in the resources sector, where I was there for about 5 years, and then come off the back of about 22 years in the Australian government in a range of security roles.
Awesome. So what's the real reason why you founded Slipstream?
Yeah, well, I sat on the other side of the table prior to this job. So I was the decision maker around security products, services, and capabilities that the large organisation acquired. So I had a great opportunity to really have a deep look at what was available in the market, and I did all the usual things. I took trips to RSA in San Francisco and trade delegation trips to places like Israel to learn about the different capabilities. And as most CISOs would know, I had a regular stream of vendors darkening my door with capabilities. But one of the things I learned out of that experience was the importance of bringing people, process, and technology together effectively to solve a security problem, rather than relying on one of those elements to be a solution. So particularly in the technology space. I recall as a CISO having something like 85 different tools, technologies and appliances that made up my security stack. It becomes a very complicated machine to manage. And so I was desperate for the market to provide integrated solutions with enterprise grade technologies, but also run by experts who had exceptional processes that were well thought out and integrated with my business, rather than delivering a solution which I either had to sort of accept or deal with the consequences of it not particularly integrating well with my business. So the motivation was very much around taking enterprise-grade, world-class, best-in-class technologies, getting a team of people who would become expert operators of those technologies, and really solid processes, and delivering that as a solution to clients. And that's ultimately what I've done with Slipstream, is to put together an active defence capability based on those principles of bringing people, process, technology, hopefully elegantly together, and delivering a really good outcome.
Speaking of bringing it elegantly together, Slipstream is the first Australian company to go through the CREST SOC Accreditation. Just wondering why you chose CREST, and subsequently, what does that mean for Slipstream customers?
Well, for starters, many years ago, back in I recall about 2010, 2011, I was actually in government when the CREST organisation was getting traction, particularly in Australia, and there was a recognised need for bringing some structure and assurance to the cybersecurity industry, and I was really pleased to see when CREST International adopted the SOC certification, because it really brought the CREST name and the CREST process, if you like, to giving assurance to clients around the SOC capability. There are plenty of people delivering SOC capabilities around Australia and in the world, and anyone who's gone out to tender looking for a SOC capability will know that it's quite an immature market, in that there's a vast spread of capabilities, approaches, technologies, standards, and price in terms of what's delivered. So there's a real need for some standard setting and some standardisation within the industry so that buyers can start to understand what they're getting when they purchase a managed SOC capability. So that's essentially what we were pleased to see CREST International is offering, and that's why we went through the process.
Great, thanks. So what was the process like, and how did you get approved?
Yeah, so look, it's a sort of a couple of stage process. So obviously, you've got to become a member of the CREST organisation first, and then go through the application phase, which is, I guess, probably best described as sort of a desktop audit, if you like, of your systems and processes, providing a lot of information about how you do what you do, and how you maintain quality, integrity of service, business continuity, how you're plugged into threat intelligence and other sort of drivers for the quality service that you bring. So that first phase is a good opportunity to sort of present yourself, but it's also, in reality, it's a good opportunity to close a few gaps as well, because there are things in the process of applying, not too many, but there are a few things which cause you to think about your service offering and allow you to improve those as you go through the process. And then the last major process is an on-site audit, and that's where CREST comes on site and essentially confirms, through observation and interviews, that you are actually executing to those standards that you attested to in the first part of the application.
How does an organisation know they need a managed SOC? Is it the size? Is it the industry they work in? What is it, the process that they should go through in that thinking?
Yeah, look, there's quite a few different drivers that we see. Obviously, there's some very clear sort of regulatory drivers. PCI compliant organisations, for instance, have a very clear obligation to require it. Then certainly within Australia, there's a range of regulations, whether you're in the banking sector or the medical sector, which just sort of have implied requirements for continuous monitoring. Those organisations that might go through some of the evaluation and certification regimes, like NIST, for instance, will get a very clear understanding that, around those workloads of detect and respond, they definitely require a security operations capability. And whether it's in-house or it's outsourced, is another question, but certainly those requirements to monitor your security constantly. The other way we find, of course, people require SOC is we also have an active incident response practice, which is very busy, responding to different sorts of clients. These are clients who have been breached and are suddenly facing the prospect of having a long-term sort of recovery and a strategic resetting of the cybersecurity. And they tend to find having a security operations capability that's not only watching them 24/7, but making a real contribution to their security architecture going forward is a really valuable asset. So in terms of industries and verticals, it really varies. I mean, obviously there's those sort of high trust organisations, as I call them, that have a very clear requirement. They might be in defence industry or healthcare or the financial services, where the need is very obvious. But then you get other sort of organisations that are clients of ours that might be in areas such as manufacturing, education, and government. We're talking about local government right through to state and federal government that have those requirements for hyper-vigilant security monitoring and response. And those organisations can be small to large. I think our smallest client that has a managed security operations capability has got something like 50 seats, whereas our largest is a multinational with tens of thousands. So size doesn't really matter. The vertical increasingly doesn't matter, and it's really about people looking to maximise their security, who are after enterprise-grade security, but don't want the cost and complexity of trying to set it up themselves. One thing the CREST accreditation process sort of shines a light on is all the different components you need to run an effective SOC. The novices will think you just need a piece of SIEM technology to pull your logs together and look for alerts, but of course it's much more complex than that. We use something like 25 odd different applications to deliver our SOC outcome, not just the SIEM. So it's a complex mix of capabilities, including threat intelligence, which has to be current and has to be broad and where it comes from, but it also has to be specific to your geography and your location. So all of that, can add up to being a very complicated thing to be able to deliver a SOC effectively. And by taking on a managed SOC capability, you can really get an enterprise grade capability for a much reduced cost than trying to do it yourself.
Just on that final point, and you did mention earlier the confluence between people, processes, and technology. What is the role of people in the organisation? Dare I say, monitoring, looking at all those 25 tools and actually making sense of it?
Yeah, so essentially they're there to make sure a couple of functions. One is to make sure the technology is actually working. One of the great sort of failings of security technology is it's all well and good when it's working, but when it's not working, when it's not optimized, of course, it's not telling you anything, and it can lead you to believe that there aren't any threats. So, the important starting point behind them is making sure that all that technology is actually turned on, properly tuned, up to date, and that surveillance system is in place. But then by taking those alerts and leveraging a lot of automation and orchestration technologies, but also then providing the human layer over the top, being able to analyse those alerts and apply a client-specific context to those alerts is sometimes critical. So having people that can understand the client vertical, understand the specific client sort of circumstances, their behaviours, what's normal, what's not, and put all that into context with what might be just an individual alert, and then make a good quality decision about what should happen. For us, we're a high-touch managed SOC provider, so our clients talk to the SOC, they talk to the operators, and they talk to the leadership in the SOC. So it's really important for us to be an extension of the client and the client's security team or the client's IT team, and be a resource for them. And that's why people are so important, because if there's something that needs to be worked through with the client in a collaborative way, they need someone at the other end of the phone that they can talk to and that they can trust and they can build a relationship with, hopefully before that call's made. So people are really critical to making that system work.
That makes sense to me. And just finally, any other factors that organisations should consider when looking for a SOC?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few. Probably one critical one is that a SOC does aggregate data, and aggregates a lot of data about the client, and so clients really should be considering questions such as sovereignty and segregation of data. They're critical aspects that are sometimes overlooked. Some SOC operators don't do those things particularly well, and you can always tell when a SOC operator hasn't thought about it, and that's when they start to restrict the client access to their own data in that environment. So it's really important to think about those things. Sovereignty of the data and also of the operators is an increasingly important issue for a lot of critical infrastructure providers, particularly not just in Australia, but in every jurisdiction. These are critical issues, and clients really have to ask some hard questions when they're looking at their SOC providers. I think the other thing I'd say is what's driving the continual vigilance and a continuous improvement in the SOC from a threat intelligence perspective. Is the SOC, really just sort of sitting back considering or taking threat feeds from third-party providers, or are they actually actively generating intelligence? And our incident response practice, which is incredibly busy, we might have 15 or more separate incidents running at any point in time. They're producing a lot of intelligence about contemporary threats, and that intelligence is fed not just into supporting the incident response for those clients, but also taken across to the SOC environment to defend our other clients. So we're learning a lot about very contemporary attack techniques because we're viewing them all the time in the incident response space, and that's helping to drive threat intelligence. So we're seeing new use cases, new threat detections being built literally every day to meet what is a very dynamic adversarial environment on the threat side. So if your SOC hasn't got that sort of engine, you should be asking some questions around where are they getting their genuine insights into the threat. And probably the last thing just to touch on in terms of how we interact with the client. I mean, we consider ourselves a people business that happens to be in the business of technology and cyber security, but it's really critical for us to be an extension of the client's security team, in some cases their entire security team, supporting their information technology or digital organisation, and to allow the client to get on with their core business. And so really looking for that collaborative, direct engagement between your managed security operations centre and the capability that it brings. So that's genuinely pushing your security posture forward every day. It's not just sort of raising alerts for you to worry about, it's actually pushing you along, because, you know, what we see with our clients is if we're not pushing their security architecture forward every day, well, then everyone's effectively going backwards, because the threat is so dynamic and has such momentum that we really need to be making that contribution across security operations, across architecture, across governance, risk and compliance. So looking for that capability to be part of the bigger picture, bigger security picture for the organisation is important.
Thanks, Brian. I've got to say those insights were fascinating. So thanks for your time today and great to chat.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.